Hi, formally, I am Sara Palughi. I am the university recruiter at iCIMS, which means that I have the really cool job of just engaging with college students for my career. I get to go to campus, as Will mentioned, network, engage, hire the best intern and entry level talent, and really just kind of help them career path and growth in the organization. It's something that I love very much. I am a 2012 graduate from Monmouth. When I was there, I studied communications. So graduated, kind of thought I'd be more along the PR route. I was really excited by public relations, and I thought that was definitely like where I wanted to go. But I ended up kind of falling into event planning. I worked for a company called Compass Group. They held the kind of conference center at Citi, and I did all the corporate event planning at Citi for my very first job out of college. After that, I kind of really got to meet the campus recruitment team, and I really loved what they did, and I thought it was just like the coolest job. Like, this seems like a fake job. Like, you get to go to campuses all day and talk to students and hire them. This seems like the most fun. And I was lucky enough to have joined Citigroup's campus recruitment team right after that first job. So I spent about a year and a half recruiting for some of their tech programs. And then I had the even cooler opportunity to kind of come back to New Jersey, work for iCIMS, which at the time we were about 300, I guess, employees. We're about 1,000 now. And I got to build their program, and I've been there kind of ever since. So that is a quick overview of me. You are not here to learn about me. I just figured you should know a little bit more about why I'm here talking about this today. You're here to learn about virtual interviewing. So like I said, we're still kind of in the middle of figuring out how this is going to go, right? How are we going to manage life post-COVID? What is life post-COVID going to look like? Where is it going to be? How are we going to engage? How are we going to interview? And I think really what it comes down to is it's going to be virtual. We are definitely going to see people, really kind of embrace virtual interviews, and definitely want to make kind of virtual interviews seem like a non-starter, right? The goal definitely for organizations and people interviewing is to get to the point where this feels just as natural and just as normal as it would be for you to come on site. Because let's face it, for the foreseeable future, this is what we've got. So I did kind of, go through some tips. I talked to my team a little bit. I did some research online to just kind of see what other recruiters and companies were saying. And I kind of came up with this, not all encompassing, but I think definitely a good jumping off point list. I will say, when putting this together, a lot of my thoughts on virtual interviewing are just my thoughts on interviewing in general. So aside from some of the nuance that I'll kind of get into, a lot of the ways that you prepare for an interview should stay the same. So I'll kind of start with that, right? How are we preparing for interviews? No matter what, you want to find out what type of interview it's going to be, but even more so in this situation, because you're going to be asked to kind of be an active participant in, how it's driven. That could be really important. So for example, is it a one-on-one with just a recruiter, right? Where you're clicking on one Zoom link, you're going into one room, you're having the conversation with the recruiter, and then when you're done, you kind of leave it. Is it going to be a panel interview? Will there be multiple people on the Zoom? Will you be expected to kind of click on a bunch of different Zoom links once one interview is over? Are people going to shift in and out? So really the more information you can have on how the format is going to be will help you prepare better so you know what to expect. Test the technology. I cannot stress this enough. We all have been to that point where we use a new software and you have to download it and you think it's going to take 30 seconds. It takes 2 hours and you're staring at the little spinny bar on your screen and you're like, oh my gosh, let's go. You do not want to be in that panic moment, when you're starting and getting ready to interview. So I would suggest a couple days before, if you have the time, just downloading whatever software you need. If you didn't have Zoom before and you are using it now, just make sure it's downloaded and ready to go. That way you can literally just jump right in. I know it's really challenging to make sure that, Wi-Fi is never, your friend. I know it's hard to be consistent, but there are definitely places in your house, we all have them, where the Wi-Fi just isn't, right? Make sure you're not in that place. Try to be in a place that has a strong enough connection that you're not choppy, going in and out, or worried. Again, it's technology, so it does what it does, but definitely anything that you can do to kind of ease your anxiety, I think would be probably one of the best tips that I can give. I would say lastly, sign into the platform a few minutes early. Make sure you're in there. The last thing you want to do is be late to a virtual interview for one reason or another. So, always kind of give yourself 5, ish minutes before you're supposed to start to log in, to kind of take a deep breath, to prep. And then when your interviewer is ready, they'll kind of pop in on the other end of the line and you'll already kind of be there ready to go. And I guess this kind of goes along with prepping technology, but make sure you have a backup plan. So again, technology, while it's our friend, can sometimes be a cause of stress and anxiety, and sometimes it doesn't exactly work exactly the way that we intend. We get it, we've all been there, but have a backup plan. Who do you reach out to if you can't log in, or if it's not working, or if your Wi-Fi is down? If the interview drops halfway, what's the plan? Do you call the recruiter? Do you have their number? Do you email? So, if you think about having a 30-minute interview slot and you run into technical issues, that could eat up a lot of your time, especially if you're just then trying to figure it out. So just make sure you have a plan, whatever it may be, whether it's calling the recruiter, sending an email, calling the person, the coordinator who set up the call, whatever it may be, just have one. From a choose your location perspective, this is a fun one. And I was kind of talking with the team before we jumped on about everybody's life now and how none of us were really prepared for work from home. So, sometimes you're lucky enough to have an office or a room in the house you can go to close the door. But most of us were not really expecting to have to be in that situation. So pick your location carefully. From silly nuance things like, try not to have it backlit where your face is just going to be like totally, blinded by the light behind you. Make sure you're in I'm lucky enough to have my kitchen table and my blank wall right behind me. That works as a really nice backdrop. But if you can't have, a plain backdrop or something that's not distracting, Zoom actually has the ability to, and I'm sure you guys know this, but it has the ability to kind of change your background virtually. So I know a lot of my colleagues who aren't so lucky or, are sharing an office with their significant other or their roommate or whatever it may be, they kind of put the like virtual palm tree scene behind them, or like San Francisco, or you can actually create your own backdrop. Again, it just kind of takes away some of the distraction of behind the scenes. So if you have a cat walking behind you during the interview, or a family member, whatever it may be, it kind of keeps it just distraction free. I guess the family member and cat is another kind of good tip. Just let the people in the house know that you're interviewing, and just to kind of make sure that you're in your quiet spot. Gather your materials. So again, this is one of those things that no matter what type of interview you're doing, I think it's incredibly important to prepare. Gathering your materials just allows you to be prepared on that call. So whether it's a glass of water, a notepad and a pen to take notes that you've prepared, this doesn't have to feel different than a regular interview, and it shouldn't at this stage, right? You should still feel like you can prep questions, have the things with you that you would need, like you would be on a regular on-site interview. Anything that you really need to make you comfortable, I would suggest keeping it within arm's reach. Prepare your own questions. So I said, kind of prep for this like you would any other interview. Prepare questions for the recruiter or for the hiring manager. They're going to want to know that you're taking this seriously, even if it's just virtual interview. For them, this is your time. This is your chance to ask the questions. So make sure you do go in just as prepared as you would, for a, regular on-site or regular phone screen type interview. And dress professionally. So I will fully admit that this is probably as dressed as I've been in the last 6 weeks since iSims has worked from home. I've definitely been rotating out some of my sweatshirts and t-shirts. So I get it. It's kind of challenging when you're in your house to feel like you're gonna, look your best and dress professionally. But again, you're still interviewing for the job. And professionally, my advice, no matter what, is different for every company. So if you're interviewing for a bank, you're going to want to be very professional. You're still going to want to show up to the virtual interview in a suit and tie, in a blazer, in something that shows that you understand the culture. But if you're, interviewing for a startup company and that's just not what they do, dressed up might just mean a little bit nicer than, you're kind of used to wearing. So I always suggest on this topic, since I know it's something that can be a little stressful and a little confusing, especially for students. if you don't have a ton of experience interviewing. Look at their Instagram, read about the company culture, get a sense for, how they kind of, dress day to day. And then I always suggest kind of taking it one level up. So if they look like they're in jeans and a t-shirt all the time, like maybe a button down, or just, a nice dress or something like that, just to show that you're taking it seriously. So that's really how I think you should prep, for a virtual interview. And again, a lot of this is very, very similar, to how I would recommend you prep for a regular interview. Obviously, the on the call part on the video conference can be a little different. So we'll jump into that immediately next. I think the most important thing when you're on the call is to limit those distractions. Again, you're working on showing who you are, your professional skill set, putting your best foot forward. You don't want any distractions. There's nothing worse than trying to focus and answer a question and someone's behind you or someone's moving around and there's loud noises. Now, again, I say this with the caveat of we're all human. And I think if anyone, any time in history is finally kind of understanding the chaos of working from home and what that looks like, it's us right now. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's got a taste of it. Everybody has family members, significant others, roommates, pets, babies, whatever it may be at home that, are kind of in their same space. So I think it's actually kind of a really interesting thing that we've all grown some more adaptability and just compassion for the work from home life. So, especially when you're on your interview, you definitely want to put your best foot forward. But, if the dog barks at the mailman or, somebody closes a cabinet loud downstairs and it's distracting or, they can hear it on the call, just try to kind of put it out of your mind and don't let it derail you. Some easy things that you can do that you do have control over: close your browser windows, just don't have anything else to look at. Silent sounds for emails and texts. So anyone who's using a Mac, when your texts come through the computer, the last thing you want is the text message dings as you're talking to your interviewer. So just put all that on silent, turn off notifications, put your phone away. Just put it 10 feet from you, face down, on silent. We all have that really bad habit of just looking at it every single time it lights up or something comes on the screen. So, everybody knows that when you're in a, in-person interview that you're not going to just have it on the table. But again, sometimes it's hard to kind of remember those things when you're home and in your office or your kitchen table. So just put it away. And again, really, I'm going to leave you with, don't stress too much about this part. There's really only so much you can control. Do your best to kind of set up the environment to allow that type of quiet space, but there's a good chance that your interviewer is also working from home at this point and also has some environmental distractions. So just try not to be, kind of too fixated. From a, how you're going to engage on the call, make eye contact. Be yourself, be as animated as you would have been in person, put inflection in your voice, try to truly make it feel like you're sitting across the table from the person that you're talking to. They're still going to want to get that culture sense. They're still going to want to get that excitement for the job. So don't kind of take it as your opportunity to just be very, still and quiet and just listening. You want to make sure that you're, really exuding the same energy and excitement that you would if you were on site. So keep your personality. It's definitely going to be important. Consider your body language. So test the camera angles before. You don't want the camera too high or too low. Want to make sure you're in the frame. Again, a lot of how we convey messages comes with body language. So just make sure that you can still kind of get some of that enthusiasm across. Relax. It's not easy to do in interviews, and especially when you add the extra complicated layer of virtual to it. I get it. It's something we're all learning to be more comfortable with, but again, you're at an advantage at this point because most interviewers might be learning this type of thing for the first time as well. They might not have ever had to do virtual interviews themselves either. So there's a greater than not chance that you and your interviewer are really in this together and you're learning more about, how to engage, how to talk about things, how to set up the camera. So just try not to stress too much. But don't forget to ask your questions. This is not going to be a webinar, right? This time we have a definite kind of question and answer period, but there's a chance that your recruiter might not specifically ask. And you're not just there to listen. You're not just there to absorb the information that they're saying. You're there to mutually assess if you think that this company is a company that's going to be a good fit for you, just like they're assessing if they think that you're a good fit for the company. So have those questions prepped in advance, make sure you ask them. Now that you've rocked it, you've done a great job on the interview. What now, right? How is it, going to be different, or how is it the same from an on-site interview? I think it's very similar at this point. I feel really, really passionately about what happens after an interview. It was advice I obviously got starting my career. My family, they're big thank you note people. It's something my mom's instilled in me forever. Follow up with the recruiter, send the thank you. Anytime you take up somebody's time, you want to thank them for it. Again, you should really be treating this just like you would be on site, which means, following up about your interest, thanking them for their time, connecting with them on LinkedIn, whatever you can do to kind of show that this is something that you're really interested in, that you're taking seriously, that you're excited about, that you absorb something about what they were saying as well. I think the thank you is like the single biggest thing that I recommend to students for sure. It doesn't even come through to me half the time anymore. I would say if I interviewed 100 people and I got 50 thank yous, I would be shocked. It definitely seems to be something that's kind of dying out. I will never understand it. So if nothing else at this point, do something to really stand out. Show that you took this as seriously as the recruiter, and definitely make sure you send your thank yous. But that is my formal presentation. I've said this before, I definitely don't want you guys to feel like I was going to be kind of taking up the whole time on a presentation and walking you through something very formal. I want to also address questions or concerns that you might be having. Everybody's going to be going through a different situation right now. Maybe it's final round interviews, maybe it's first round interviews, panel style, one-on-one. I'm happy to kind of walk through any questions you might have. And I'm also hoping that I can learn a thing or two on this call as well, because it's going to be the new normal for all. All right. Okay, Laura, do you have any questions or suggestions about what the thank you note should include? Yeah, I think a really kind of safe thank you note always includes like a thank you so much for your time. I was really excited to learn about the role and that it would entail X, Y, and Z. I think that I would be a really good fit for the role because this, and I just want to reaffirm my interest and thank you so much. Like that type of thing. Like thanks for your time. I learned this. I'm a good fit for that. And then, kind of close it out. It does not have to be 6 paragraphs, but it should be thoughtful. It should be personalized. Check your fonts. Sometimes I get thank you notes that are in like 3 different fonts. You can clearly tell they copied and pasted, which is fine. I get it. Just do the extra kind of font check before you hit send. What are some good questions to prepare and ask at the end of the interview? So that's a good one. I would say keep it genuine. I can't tell you how obvious it is when you've printed out a list of 100 questions to ask a recruiter, and I can tell you're just kind of going through the motions. Figure out what's important to you. So is it culture? Is it learning and development? Is it the components of the job? It's a combination of all 3. But whatever it is, just kind of make it personal, make it authentic and genuine. Asking questions like, what are the daily responsibilities? When the recruiter's kind of already gone through the daily responsibilities can kind of make them feel like you're not really paying attention. I'd say the most impactful interviews I've had are when students have very thoughtful questions to ask, and it shows me that they take this seriously, and they've done some type of research on the company beforehand, which just in case this doesn't come up, I always like to stress researching the company beforehand. Not a virtual interviewing thing, no matter what interviewing thing. Always research the company, always know why you want to join them, always know a little bit about what they do. Like I said, iCIMS is a recruitment software company that can be lost on some people. It's a lot to kind of take in sometimes, but as long as you can tell me something about the company, show that you did take the time, that's totally fine. How long post virtual interview would you send the thank you? There's no exact formula. I would say refrain from doing it immediately upon getting off the call, because it does kind of seem a little disingenuous at that point, like you've prepped it before you even talk to the recruiter. I think a safe bet is, later that day. So say you had a morning interview, later in the evening or even the next day. I wouldn't wait too long because, chances are they're going to want to kind of make a decision on moving forward or not. And you definitely want to kind of express that thank you before they make a decision. But it doesn't have to be, and it really shouldn't be immediate. Take some time and reflect on the interview and kind of decide what are those things you want to include on there. What are you excited about? What did you learn? And just make sure you include that as well. Do you have any additional advice for graduate school interviews? So I'm assuming you mean like literally interviewing to kind of go to grad school. I would say you're always in any interview really focusing on answering questions and putting your best foot forward. So think through the questions, make sure you prepare, have your answers kind of ready. If you can get kind of a list of traditional questions, that would be great. I always say, the situational type interview questions are what we focus on at iCIMS. They're called behavioral-based interviewing. It's a tactic that recruiters will use to kind of dig into your background and figure out like what you've done as a predictor of what you will do. So, questions like, tell me about a time where you X. So tell me about a time where you overcame an obstacle. And really what we're looking for are specific answers. Explain the time, explain what you were doing, what was the result of what you'd done, really kind of give us the meat that we're looking for. So as not an admissions person, I would say from a recruiter's perspective, someone who does interview, you're always going to kind of want to make sure you're listening to the question, giving a robust answer, and definitely prepare the same way you would for a professional interview. I hope I answered your question. What is the biggest concern have you heard or noticed with virtual interviews? So we, from a virtual interview perspective, I think the biggest concern that most people have is that, well, pre-COVID, I would say virtual interviewers, were probably more used to interviewing than candidates, where candidates would feel like, am I going to have the same opportunity as someone who came on site? Is my time going to be just as valued? Is it going to make me look bad that I'm remote? I think post-COVID, that's not even a concern anymore. Like I said, people are really starting to get really, really understanding about not being able to always travel, not being able to necessarily, literally not being able to necessarily get on a plane, but also, that everybody has things going on. So I would say that was kind of a pre-COVID concern. From my perspective, I tend to be a control freak. I really, really like when I can control my environment and the things around me. It makes me comfortable. You can't really control the tech in a virtual interview. When you're face-to-face with somebody, the Wi-Fi going down does not have an impact. Not being able to kind of get the program up and running, there's all these kind of extra anxieties, I think, with prepping for a virtual interview, which is where a lot of my like pre-call notes came from, really just ways to kind of alleviate some of that anxiety. How do you handle the question, what are your weaknesses? I don't love that question. I will not be asking anybody that question. I think it's a little antiquated, but when someone's asking you those questions, just try to be as honest and transparent. Every single person on the face of the planet is not good at something, or, could be better at something else. My manager always says, any negative is usually an overuse of a positive, which I think has a lot of truth to it. So just try to be as upfront and honest as you can. Try not to be the cliche answer of like, I'm too passionate, I'm too driven, I'm too perfect. Like, it's going to be hard for me to pull back my perfection. Again, you want to be genuine. It's a tough question. I wish it was something that recruiters didn't ask because it's not really giving you what you need. It's not a behavioral-based interview. It's not going to show future performance or past performance. I would take it in stride and just, think truly about what some of the things that, are your overuse of a positive that become a negative. Just try to be transparent about that. Do you have any advice on cover letters? I always feel like I'm just repeating my resume. Personal preference, I'm not a cover letter person. I'm also not an objective statement person, but that's just me. There are a lot of recruiters on my team that would really value something like that in certain situations. I tend to be of the mindset that your resume really should be the kind of roadmap to what your experience is. So to your point, yes, the cover letter would then be kind of just an additional way to kind of talk about your experience. If your resume is set up correctly to show your experience and to tell that story, it's really all that you would need. However, if companies do require cover letters, try to figure out why. Are they trying to get a sense of literally your writing abilities? Are they trying to get a sense of your personality? Are they trying to get a sense of your motivation? Like, are you really motivated for this job? Will you go the extra mile? So I would try not to get too crazy about a generic cover letter and just kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. If the company asks for one and why they're looking to have one, then you can kind of tailor it to such. I'm going back to work after 13 years, an MBA degree, which is very different than my undergraduate degree, which is in chemistry. I find it very intimidating to start a new career path after such a long gap. Do you have any suggestions for how to respond to not having experience in the career that I'm trying to focus on? Yeah, again, that's kind of your story, your path, right? You're going to want to explain to recruiters your thought process and how you got there. So if you're actively, kind of pursuing your MBA, or you've acquired your MBA, which in that case, congratulations, that should obviously be on your resume, and you should, in this sense, kind of have that objective statement, or just, something that draws the conclusion. I always say, not a fan of objective statements. I think they're kind of redundant, except when you're making a career change. You maybe can't always infer from somebody's resume how they got from chemistry to an MBA. But if you could articulate that in something like an objective statement, that would be great. Look, we're in a world where people change careers literally all the time. As new jobs emerge and as other things become important. Look at all the people going into healthcare now after this that previously had no interest or no care to join. They're now motivated and passionate about it. So I think as long as you can draw that conclusion and make a very kind of thoughtful bridge between how you went from chemistry, why you're looking to pursue a more business-focused job, that's definitely something that recruiters can then connect with. Don't leave it up to them to make that connection. How do you apply to internships if many companies left their listings up before COVID with the intention of no longer hiring? Yeah, it's been a rough time. In full transparency, we did decide to cancel our internship program for this year. It was a really tough decision to make across the line. A lot of it had to do with not being sure if we were going to be on site, not being sure, if we could provide that experience that, we wanted to give the interns. And I know that a lot of companies are unfortunately in the same boat that we are. I would say kind of change your focus, right? If I know it's really a tale as old as time that you should focus on internships, and trust me, I am a campus recruiter. I will tell you that internships are incredibly important to your career, and you should absolutely make sure that you're filling your summers and your fall and any time that you can getting that tangible work experience. We're in unprecedented times. Everybody's on the same page with what this looks like. Recruiters get it. Chances are their days are just as impacted as yours from a lack of internships. Focus on other things. What else can you do? Building up other skill sets, volunteering, trying to build your resumes in other ways. I really, truly feel, I've talked to some of my campus recruitment colleagues and other, companies and other areas of the business, and everyone's on the same page. Nobody's really going to blame students for not having an internship during this summer. We get it, we know it, but what we are going to hold the interns to, the students to, is doing something with your time. What extra trainings, what extra, activities, what things are you doing to better yourself, better your resume? So I would say my recommendation is to kind of shift focus from having a formal internship to seeing what other things you can do over the summer to build your professional development. That way, once September starts and recruiting kind of resumes for campus, you can jump right in there and say, like, my internship was canceled, or I didn't get an internship before companies stopped hiring, but I did take my time over the summer to do X, Y, and Z. I learned this, I participated in that, I volunteered here, and I'm pretty confident that recruiters are going to see it as just as good. Do you have any advice for group interviews with multiple students? Yeah, again, something else I'm not a huge fan of. I think you should really give everybody their opportunity to kind of shine one-on-one. But if that is the case, again, follow up with the recruiter about what the expectation is. Is everyone going to have a set amount of time to speak? Are hiring managers, or is the hiring manager going to call on people individually? Are you supposed to be prepared with anything? How are questions going to be pitched? That way you're not talking over people and trying to dominate the conversation or being too quiet. When you get to that hiring manager interview round, your recruiter is your advocate. They've already been bought into your talents and skills and abilities. They've spent time with you. They're invested in your success. So any questions, anything you're anxious about at that stage, go to them, ask the question. They're going to want you to be as prepared as possible. You make them look really good. You make that whole process run really smoothly. So just if you have any questions about format, go to the recruiter. I would say that's your best bet, so you can actually feel comfortable preparing for it and you know what to expect when you jump in. I think this is our last question. Do you have any advice on how to help job applicants stand out, or job applications stand out? Yeah, my tip here, the broadest tip that I can give on standing out in a recruitment process is always tailoring your resume to the job. I know that sounds like really simple and kind of like a no-brainer, but I really can't stress enough how much of a difference it makes. There's a good chance, especially coming out of college, or if you're making a career change or wherever your current status is, that you're not going to be necessarily like deeply functionally proficient in one thing. And it might be, your resume might kind of be all over the place, or you might have had a broad range of experience in something, but you do want to focus on one kind of piece of it. My kind of example is when I actually applied to iCIMS at Citi. My title was, it was graduate recruitment and program management. And then when iCIMS had their posting up, the posting was for a university relations specialist. Very similar job, very similar function. I knew exactly what the day was going to look like. I knew that if somebody was recruiting, they would understand that I did that job at Citi, but I didn't want to take any chances. So I just kind of tweaked the title on my resume a little bit. I didn't lie. I didn't make up things I didn't do. But I just kind of showed that I was like thoughtfully kind of pulling them together. I always suggest this to anyone who's in like technology, for example, who might be interested in both front end and back end, or they might love design, but also the really technical piece of it. Try to tailor your resume based on what you're applying for. So if it's a design focused role, focus on those classes that you took that were more design focused to show that you have that experience, or add an extra bullet or two to your internship that you think really speaks to that, and maybe cut back on an internship that doesn't necessarily speak to it. So tailoring your resume, taking the time to thoughtfully read through the qualifications and the duties and responsibilities is going to help you better match what you already know, your skill set, what you've done, with what they're looking for. And it really helps to draw that connection between your application and the job. The recruiter sees it and right away thinks, oh, yep, I am looking for these 6 skill sets. This person has them on their resume. Great match. Do you recommend that the resume should only be 1 page, or can I go on to 2 pages? You guys are asking like every tried and true recruiter question. This is another one that we even have debates on my team at iCIMS about how people feel about this. As a university recruiter, I will stand very firm that especially if you're coming out of college or you're early in your career, 1 page. I forget who the CEO was. It's a CEO of like a major company, and his resume is 1 page, and it was like buzzing around LinkedIn a few years ago, and it was like, if Jeff Bezos, I don't know if it was him, but if he can have a 1 page resume, you can have a 1 page resume. It's definitely something that I recommend, not necessarily from a rigidness of you should only have 1 page, but think about how you're getting to 2 pages, right? You do not need to list out a bullet of every single thing you do in your job or your internship. I would say 3 or 4 bullets of the really impactful stuff, what you changed, what you brought to the table, how you improved a process, or how you increased the bottom line, or just really the kind of meaty things that you do. I have a friend who's kind of in the market looking for a new job at this point, and she's in events, and she kind of like listed out every single thing from an event management perspective that she's ever done. And I'm like, yep, end-to-end event management will cover all of that. You do not need to list it as separate bullets. So I think just kind of look at how you're getting there. Recruiters spend about 5 seconds on resumes. So you want those 5 seconds to be really meaningful, and you want them to really absorb the kind of bulk of your experience, not spend all that time reading through bullets. So you're never going to not get selected for a job because your resume is 2 pages. But I would really recommend kind of taking a look and trimming back on some of the bullets. I'm reading some of your comments now. Cool. Should your LinkedIn profile reflect your resume, or should it be a very brief version of your experiences? LinkedIn's another one that I think is really underutilized. People search for you on LinkedIn. So if anyone's ever gotten an email from a recruiter, it's because they found some keyword in your resume or in your LinkedIn profile that was in the skills section, that was in the job title that you had, that was in the bullets, whatever it may be. I always find that you kind of do want to have a decent amount of experience listed on there so you're findable. So recruiters who are looking for someone with experience in international sales, can look for certain keywords that, make a successful international salesman, and they can find your profile easily. I don't think you necessarily need to copy and paste your entire resume, but the little kind of tidbits that you can put on there that help a recruiter understand, if you just list like sales rep, for 2 years at X company, doesn't really give us too much about what you did. But if you want to just put like a little paragraph, like 2 sentences or a little blurb about what you did in that job, I definitely think that would help recruiters at least figure out if you're a good fit or not. So you don't need to go crazy. It doesn't need to look exactly like your resume, but that is your opportunity to be findable, right? To put your experience out there and recruiters can find you easily. In your experience, what are some of the top skills you look for in employees and how they're used in the workforce? And do you have any advice with adapting to and understanding workplace language and culture? So some of the top skills that we look for in employees, for us at iCIMS, we're really focused on, are you going to be a positive addition to our culture, right? We really want to bring people on who are going to share in our cultural values, right? And those are things like passion, drive, adaptability. We want to know that you're going to come in and be a positive addition to that, especially at the early career level. We're always kind of the mindset that we can teach you a lot, right? You obviously want to come in with some knowledge of the job and some experience, but we can't teach you to be that great cultural fit, right? We can't teach you to have passion for what you do and be motivated and be adaptable and continuously want to improve on yourself. So purely from my kind of role here at iCIMS, I know that those are some of the most important things that we look for. To answer your second question, do you have any advice with adapting to and understanding workplace culture and language? I really think it's about doing the research at the front end and finding companies, applying to companies that match your values and where you want to be and what's important to you. You should feel like you belong at the company that you're at. You should feel that you align with their mission, that you understand the vision, that it's a company that you believe in, that you're excited about. And then when you come in, people are going to be like you. They're going to feel the same things. They're going to value the same things. You're going to feel kind of that right at home feeling. You'll know that it's right. Now you're always going to have to kind of adapt to new cultures when you change jobs and, as you kind of move through your career. So I say always just be really true to yourself, ask a ton of questions. If you've picked the right company, if you picked a company that values the same things that you do, it really shouldn't be that much of a stressful kind of pivot. Any other questions? I know Laura's kind of wrapping it up there a little bit at the bottom, and obviously, Team Monmouth, you guys are more than, okay to share out my contact information in case anybody has any questions they want to take offline or follow up with me after. I'm more than happy to kind of continue Q&A one-on-one if that's easier.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I will put the alumni email address in the chat box. So if anybody has any questions, I can connect you directly to Sarah. But thank you so much. That was really wonderful and very thoughtful. And I appreciate everybody's thoughtful questions and your detailed response. I learned a lot in that 45 minutes. So thank you so much. It was really, really great. And we appreciate you taking some time out of your Wednesday evening to be with us and to help our students and our alumni. I'm sure everybody on this webinar appreciates it as well.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, I'm putting the email address here, but thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. And I hope everybody stays happy and healthy and safe and at home.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
All right, good night. Thanks again, Sarah.
Anytime.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.